Alright, so welcome to Revit 2019 Demo 37. To get started, we're going to continue from Revit 2019 Demo 36. What we're going to want to do here is we're going to start by creating a smart window tag tagged by instance. So we're going to create another useful smart window tag, one that will give us the ability to tag a window by instance. As you know, window tags are a type mark tag, and 3 exact windows will have the same exact tag number. So what we want to do is we want to go to File, New, Family, Annotation, and we want to create a window tag. So under window tag, we're going to open up the label. So we're going to create a label, just place here, and we want to drop mark in place. And if you remember, mark incrementally adds up as you're placing windows. So what we want to do is set the sample value to a capital A. And we're going to hit apply. Okay. We're going to zoom in, hit escape twice, kind of arrow key this down to the center. And then what we want to do is we want to create a polygon. So we're going to go, once we get this aligned in, we're going to go create line polygon. And it's from the center point. And we want to create one roughly like this, to where it's ballpark centered. And then I'm going to just arrow key this kind of in place. That looks pretty good to me. We're going to file, save as, family, and we want to save this under your demo folders of families as Gallatin. Oh, sorry. We're going to save it as Gallatin window instance. Gallatin window instance tag. And let me make sure I'm in the right folder here. Demos, families, perfect. Gallatin window instance tag, save. Now that that's saved, you're going to load into project and close. And what you'll notice is as you place this, depending on the mark value of whatever window is associated, it's going to draw in the correct value. Now notice that I've got this little error kind of coming up where the tag is overwriting the polygon and it doesn't look quite right. So if I edit this family, what I want to do is I want to make this polygon larger. So I'm going to tab select it and actually delete it. So tab select the whole thing, delete it, create a new one that's a tad bit larger. So line, polygon, and we're going to go out to about here. So it's just a bit larger. We'll save it. Yes, we want to replace the instance of the existing file, load into project and close, overwrite the existing version and its parameter information. Now that looks much better. It's a little bit larger than this window tag, but it's different, and that's okay. And I think that looks pretty decent. You can adjust the mark values here as well. And so if you were going through and numbering, so if I hit TG, that's 124. I have that same problem again because I have that value at 124, but if I were to change that to 2, it's going to look okay. If you get up into the hundreds with windows in your project, it'd be advised to scale this up, but since we're in the about 2 digits, this will be just fine. So we can also go A, and then you can name this B, but that's one way that you could start to name these, and it updates the parameter information for that mark value as well as I change those. So just keep that in mind. Now we're going to go ahead and continue on to the next portion, which are drafting views. So we're going to save this demo as demo37. So file, save as, project, demo37. I'm replacing one that I had already created. You won't have one, so that's why that error came up. But you'll just save it fresh as Revit 2019 Demo 37. I'm going to close out of this, and I want to open up Revit 2019 Demo 8. So Demo 8, we're going to open that. Now one thing to explain with drafting views, you guys have already had a lot of experience with it, but what we want to do is we want to start to kind of dive a little deeper into them. So Revit needs a place to put .dwgs, .jpegs, etc. Drawings and images that are not attached to the building model. Drafting views provide this opportunity. So we opened up Revit 2019 Demo 8, and I have 2 items that need to go into my Revit drawing. I have a CAD drawing and an elevation concept JPEG. So to start, we're going to go to View, we're going to go to Drafting View, and I'm going to create one called Concept. Make sure Cap Locks is off. Elevation, concept elevation and views, and I want that to be 1.5 inches equals 1 foot, which is a scan. Hit OK, and I'm going to insert an image. Now you've done this with your scans that have been associated to your drawings that you've done in the beginning of the semester. And we're going to just do the same thing of almost like a rendering drawing. So this is what you would do for assignment number 5. But what we're going to do is we're going to go into images, elevations, and I'm going to open this one up and just place it in space. Now you want to make sure that the quality of the scan that you've selected is high enough. I pulled this from the book, and because it was pulled from the book or the website that I went to, it's a bit funky in terms of how it's being represented. But for now, this gets the point across of how to get your overall image placed. So we've placed that on there, and now we want to create a new sheet. So we'll look and we'll see that concept elevation views have been created. We're going to create a new sheet, and we're going to create the D-size sheet, or we can load the family that we created earlier. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to navigate to the families folder where my demos files are, and I'm going to pull in, let's see if I have a title block in here. I may not have saved it in this location. You want to check and make sure that you're pulling from the correct location. And I'm going to pull open that family file, which is that ArcD custom title block Brian. And now that's loaded. And so now I have my sheet. And I don't have a project name for this demo file, and I don't have the sheet name, but at least it's all loaded in there. And then what I can do is I can just drag this concept elevation view over, and it's placed on the sheet. So it does a pretty nice job at placing an item that we've pulled in on the sheet. And you can change the scale by activating the view just like other Revit views. So you could double click in and change this to a different scale. Let's try it at 1 foot, or 1 inch equals a foot. And so it scales it down. And now we want to bring in an AutoCAD file. So we'll go ahead and scale this back up. Yeah, that's about right. And we'll go ahead and try to do the same thing. So bringing in an AutoCAD file, we want to go into Insert, Import CAD, right here. And we want to name it, we're going to name this one Furniture Example. And what we want to do is we want to set the scale of 1 inch equals 1 foot, which is there. So we have that set correctly for now. So let's navigate to, I created a CAD folder, and this is going to be furniture for bar and restaurant. So I'm just going to pull this file in. So I'm just going to open it. Import detected, no valid elements in the file's paper space. Do you want to import from the model space? Now, we don't want to do that because what we want to do is we want to create a new drafting view. So some of you will make that mistake. You'll try to import CAD or insert an image on the title block. I believe you can insert an image, so let's just test that and see what happens as well. You can place it directly on the sheet, an image, but it's better to store them in drafting views. So you'll notice that when I went to import that CAD file, it freaked out because I was in the title block. What we want to do is create a new drafting view. So we'll go to View, Drafting View. We want it to be 1 inch equals 1 foot, 1 to 1. Actually, 1 inch equals 1 foot is not 1 to 1. 1 to 1 would be 12 inches equals 1 foot. But we'll do 1 inch equals 1 foot. We'll call this Furniture Example. Hit OK. And then from here, we want to insert Import CAD because now it has model space to detect. So in your demos file, create this CAD folder, save this file in that CAD folder. We can preserve the CAD files. I prefer when I'm bringing these items in to change them to black and white. So we're going to hit open, and now you'll notice that we have this CAD file in here. Now, one dangerous thing about importing CAD files is that it creates all these layers. So if I hit VV, go into imported categories, you'll notice that I have the 0 cadblock.com where I found it and def points. If it had any other ones, those are going to get loaded in. We'll also notice if we go into our additional settings, line styles, that it pulls in, it didn't in this case, but sometimes it will pull in those line styles as well. So importing can be a little dangerous sometimes, so just be aware of that. it's always better to insert a link. So if you, rather than importing CAD, linking CAD would be better. So what I could do is I could unpin this, delete it, link CAD, pull in furniture for bar. It's the same thing. The difference is I don't have all those layers showing up potentially, or crowding up my layers file inside of the project. So I'm going to undo a couple times to get that original imported one in. So notice its import symbol. If I control Y, it's also an import symbol, but it's linked. So there's a difference between what is drawn and what is imported. So just be aware of that. We'll undo a couple times. What we'll do is we'll go ahead and go back to our furniture example. Here it is. This is the imported symbol for the DWG. And just be aware that there's these values inside of the annotation side or imported category side that you can turn on and off. So if I turn off the 0 layer, that's going to turn everything off. So if an architect sends you a CAD file and you were to pull this in, whether it's linked or imported, that'll show up here. So one other thing, since this is imported, let's do an insert link of the same one. At least one instance of this link already exists. It could be visible. We'll say yes to continue, VV, imported categories. I just wanted to make sure that this didn't say linked categories. So this is good. This is correct. Now, one thing that we can do now is we can go back to that sheet that we had created, and we can actually drag the furniture example onto the sheet. Now that scale's too large, so you could just scale it down. So we could hit apply. And notice that it's scaling to Revit size. So if your firm had a bunch of Revit details that were in CAD format, you could actually bring them in as links initially. And then as your company's starting to build those details, you could trace these with your detail lines. So you could come in and trace all of these. You could also pick lines. So I could come in here and pick lines to start to draw these out. Now that's very important because when you're migrating your firm from CAD to Revit, that becomes valuable. Now, let me make sure we haven't skipped over anything. I think we're in good shape. Let's go ahead. We dragged it onto the sheet. You can bring in standard AutoCAD details into Revit this way, details that are not attached to the building model. You can even create sheets of standard details and save them to your template file for use on each project. So one thing that's very important with these is that you could actually save these to a new file if you wanted to, and pull them in on different files, or you could just save this template file or as your template file, and it would be loaded in there under your drafting views, and you're just building this library of details. So one thing to note is that you can do a full or partial explode when bringing in DWG files. Just look for the boxes at the top of the drafting view. You can also delete layers in that view. So one thing to note is if your CAD file has the layers set up correctly, then it's probably okay to pull those line weights in. But if I were to explode this, it won't let me right now. That's because this is a linked file. So let's go ahead and do the import one more time from within this piece. So we'll go in, I'm just doing it from the view, import CAD, furniture, yes. It's not visible. Let's go into furniture example, hit CE. Let's try this one more time. Import CAD, furniture for bar, black and white, hit OK. There it is. So it wanted me to be inside of the drafting view. So we're in here, that's all good. Now since I imported it, I can now explode it. Disassembles the import symbol one level to its next highest level of elements. When you perform a partial explode, the import symbol yields nested import symbols. You can continue to partially explode these nested import symbols until they are converted to Revit elements. So if I explode these, I now have lines. The problem is it's creating these lines inside of that line styles. So that's what I was telling you to beware of. So I have that 0 that was in there. I don't have the CAD.com one in there, which is kind of nice. But now that these are all Revit symbols, if I was paying attention to what values were on a specific layer, or if I had other layers that were in here, I could now take these values and change them to whatever Revit elements that I want. And so that makes it, I just changed those to thin lines. So if I went into imported categories and turned off the 0 layer, those ones imported and exploded correctly. The other ones probably did not. or they associated to a different line style. Let's see, we have line style 0, lines 029. So one thing to look for in line styles is just to pay attention to what variables are coming in. Now I could change all of these at once, so I could change all of those. Notice that these are still blocked out. Now that's because you probably need to explode again. So we're going to filter to see what's here. We have some lines, we have some thin lines, and then we have this DWG still. So what we could do is we could select filter, turn off these lines, hit apply, hit OK, and now I can't explode. It's not going to let me explode those. But if I select one at a time, I can. If I select multiple, it's not letting me. So that's something to note as well, because I can hit explode, now that one's good. Hit explode, now that one's good. And so now I'm just going through and exploding these items and bringing them in. And so now I can start to group these as well. So there's a lot of power in being able to import the CAD files, but there's a lot of things that can go wrong when you do that. And one of those is just pulling in a bunch of layer values that you don't need. For this particular example, there weren't a lot of layer values, and because there weren't, I'm not having that problem. One other thing to note is when you explode items, notice how this looks slightly different than this one. When I hit explode, sometimes things will get deleted. So that's something to note as well, that you may have to do some cleanup. And that's just some things that Revit's kind of struggled with over the years. They've gotten a lot better with it. And you have to realize we're basically exploding it into Revit elements. Now, it's incredibly dangerous, again, like I've mentioned, to explode these items, because if there's a ton of layers, your line styles will get overloaded. So I'm just going through and kind of exploding these. One other thing I'd like to add into this is that we could create detail groups with these. So we could actually highlight these elements and we could create a group. There's also a way under annotate. If we go to annotate, there are detail groups and we could create a group. And I could call this like furniture group, or I could say just, let's call this like living arrangement or something like that, or living room furniture. Let's do that, living room furniture. Hit OK. And now that created a group of it. So if I were to come into my detail groups and to place a detail group, that detail group can now be replicated throughout the project. So that's a really powerful feature, because if you're pulling in these CAD files and you're creating these detail groups, you can now rapidly do much of what you wanted to do in AutoCAD identically. You can also, I believe, create a detail group potentially from this symbol. Let's just see if it'll let us. So if I go in here and create group, I just selected that. We'll call it desk arrangement. I didn't even explode that, but now it's a detail group. So now if I create similar, I can place that group wherever I want. And so you don't have to explode it to get it to do a detail group. Things may go funky compared to not having, you know, a DWG versus a imported file, but just be aware of that. That's something important. Now, same thing with your line weights. Like, these are all one line weight right now. If you really wanted to adjust these, you created that group of line styles. You could go through each one of these lines and associate it to the correct line style that you want now. So that's the power behind a lot of the drafting views, as well as the ability to import CAD symbols. We went over some detail groups in here. There's a second note that I want to discuss. Revit cannot import a Microsoft Word document, unfortunately. So what I would do is, if I was opening up a Word document, we'll go ahead and use this Word document as an example. These are what I'm kind of reading off of. We'll copy these notes, Control C. I could go in on the sheet and create text, hit Control V, and that's one way I would get it over from a Word document. So the cut, copy, and paste has been improved. The text box has been improved. And so just be aware of that. That's one quick way to kind of bring something over. However, Revit cannot import a Microsoft Word file. Note number 3, Revit also cannot import a PDF, unfortunately. So as you remember, when you were scanning in your projects and you created PDFs, you would export those to images. That's pretty easy to do. In the future, I think Revit will create an underlay to where we will be able to pull in PDFs, but for right now, it's just not in there. People have requested it. Note number 4, Revit can import a GIF, so a GIF, or a GIF, however you want to call it, JPEG, so .jpg, .jpeg, .png, .tiff files. So if you can get your image into one of those formats, Revit will import it. And we kind of showcase that here. Now, watch your file size when importing images, and you'll notice this as you start to save your home for Mr. Peterson. We've done 5 different assignments now, and once the 5th assignment's imported in, your file size will probably be close to 30 to 40 megabytes. And remember what I said, anything that exceeds 40 for a template file is a bit much to start from. However, I've worked with file types that can go up to a half a gig all the way up to a couple gigs, but Revit does slow down when it gets to that point. All right, so for this lecture, let's go ahead and save this as revit2019demo37. And I know we'd already created demo37 and it will overwrite it. The purpose of creating demo37 was to create that smart tag, and we did save that in the families folder, so we won't be losing out on much. So we're going to go ahead and file save, and that's going to be saved as 2019 demo37. I will see you in the next lecture.